The year is 2023. At the time of recording this video, Tears of the Kingdom just released a few days ago, the last major game we know of releasing on the Switch. Of course, we still have the wonderful Pikmin 4 and likely some other first-party Nintendo games on the way, but I think it is safe to say we are in the final few chapters of the Switch's life. As sad as it is to say this because I love this console so much, the next generation is on the horizon. So recently, I've been thinking a lot about what the next console could be, and let's discuss in this video. Also, quickly before we dive into this topic, it would help out a ton if you could subscribe. If you love Nintendo content, you'll love this channel, and let's talk about the next generation Nintendo system.
Sunrise.
So first things first, will it be a Switch 2 or a completely new idea? Well, Nintendo has kind of backed themselves into a corner with the Switch, as going back to the separate handheld and separate home console meta would make zero sense. Instead of spreading out their resources, having to worry about which games will go on which system, worrying about marketing to consoles, all of this extra nonsense, they have it all in one place. And think of the consumer too. Now that we have a taste of what it is like to have one system that works as both a handheld and a home console, why on earth would we want to go back to having to buy two different systems? So maybe sometime in the future, a very long time away, they could go back to just a classic handheld and a classic home console once the hybrid style has been milked dry, but for Nintendo to abandon it this soon would make zero sense. From a business standpoint, a consumer standpoint, a developer standpoint, a million different standpoints. I would be extremely shocked if they abandoned the Switch branding this early on. Now, whenever the idea of a Switch 2 is brought up, the Wii U is always mentioned as some sort of counterpoint, as if to say, well, Nintendo will never do that again because of the Wii U's failure. Look, we all know why the Wii U failed. I'm not going to re-explain it to you the 8,000th time, but to put it in simple terms, the Wii U didn't fail because it was a successor to the Wii. Nintendo knows what they did wrong that generation, and I'm sure they won't repeat it here. If you want evidence of previous console successors being successful, look no further than the SNES, the GBA, even the 3DS. Yes, they've never outsold the originals, but they still sold incredibly well. The foundations are already there for Nintendo. They have the hybrid format, they don't need to change much for the next system, and while it may not sell as much as the OG Switch, if they could even sell half of what the Switch's lifetime sales are going to be, that would be a huge win for them. Every time Nintendo goes for a bold new idea, a new gimmick, it's a risk. It could flop, the Switch could have flopped, but it didn't. But again, going back to the Wii U briefly, Nintendo got a bit too comfy there and thought, well, if the Wii was a huge success, as long as the next system has the Wii branding, it'll do well, right? Wrong. And to avoid that, here is what the Switch 2 needs to have. Firstly, in my opinion, the most important feature, some may disagree when I say the most important feature, but you're wrong, okay? Backwards compatibility. This should be an industry standard at this point. Finally, Sony and Microsoft have started to understand the importance of this, and understandably the Switch wasn't backwards compatible, which is fine. We went from discs to cartridges, so that's fine, but there's no excuse for this next system. When the PS5 first dropped and I finished Miles Morales and had nothing else to play, the only thing keeping me on that console was the backwards compatibility. Being able to take my entire Switch library to the next system would be fantastic. All of that progress, all of those memories, it would be great. The same applies for Nintendo Switch Online. A lot of people still don't like Switch Online, and that's fine. It has a lot of flaws, but one thing I'm sure we can all agree on is how much it has improved since launch. Having access to NES, SNES, N64, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Boy Advance all at launch, again, would be huge. And just completely restarting all of that would make zero sense. Remember when the Switch first launched? Other than Breath of the Wild, there wasn't much there, and yes, there was plenty of games releasing in that first year. There was only like sort of a month wait between each major game. I'm not saying it was a bad launch year at all, the complete opposite, it was great, but having all of that additional content there on day one, even if it's old content, would still be amazing, and that's how it should be. Also, kind of a side note here, but I definitely think the next system should see more consoles get added to the Nintendo Switch Online service, such as GameCube, DS, and maybe a few other consoles here and there. But that's a topic for another video. Now let's talk about graphics. Yes, we all knew this one was coming, and some might even argue that this is the most important feature for the next system, and that's completely fair. It's definitely a given that the next system will be more powerful, but how much is enough? I think at the bare minimum, the next console should have a solid, stable 60 FPS in handheld mode, and in terms of the resolution, that isn't as important to me and isn't as important as some people think. If we look at the Steam Deck, for example, that's at 720p in handheld, and if we look at the current Switch as well, some games can't even run in a stable 720p 60 FPS in handheld mode. So as long as they've got that stable footing on the next system, that's all I care about the most. Yes, it would be nice to have 1080p 60 FPS in handheld. It might be a bit much of an ask. Now in terms of the dock mode, again 60 FPS should just be a given at this point. It should be a standard, especially in docked. But in terms of the next Switch dock itself, I do hope that it has a bit more of an oomph to it. I do hope that it does power the system up a little bit more instead of literally just being a glorified HDMI cable. It would be nice if it could add some extra power to it and maybe boost the FPS even more, especially the resolution. Again, 1080p is just the standard, and seeing as the current Switch is 1080p in docks, it would be at least reasonable to have it in 2K, but definitely with how the industry is going and everything, I think an upscaled 4K is reasonable. The best way to describe this system, I think, would be between the PS4 and PS5. So maybe on the level as the PS4 Pro, especially when you consider that the current Switch is basically just a weaker version of the PS4/Xbox One. I'll say that's fair. I don't really know that much about graphics, I'm not a big graphics guy, but I just want the next system to be a stable 60 FPS, run the games fine, as long as it's more powerful than the current Switch, has a better battery life, and is powerful enough for third parties to continue to support the system, I'm happy. Something else that is very important to me personally is the personality of a console. And what do I mean by that? Let me just show you. And what does the Switch have? If you still don't know what I'm talking about the charm of these old systems. The music, the sound effects. I want this shopping bag guy back. The menu music, the eShop music that would change every few months when these consoles were still active. Street Pass, the weather channel, the camera app, all these little silly apps that gave these consoles the personality we now cherish. Heck, even the settings had music on the 3DS. I miss this. I miss themes. I miss it all. I thought at first maybe they rushed the Switch out and that is why it was so plain and empty, and over time they'd update it with at least themes or something, but still, nothing. Now that they have the foundations for the Switch, I really hope with the Switch 2 they have more time to add in these silly little additions that overall mean so much. Now let's talk about gimmicks. Look, it's Nintendo. We all know even if the next system is just the Switch 2, there has to be a new gimmick, big or small, it'll be there. The 3DS added 3D, the Wii U had the gamepad, maybe they go the Game Boy Advance and SNES route, but come on. This is modern Nintendo, they'll do something for sure, and honestly, I genuinely have no idea what it could be. Maybe they expand on AR a little bit. Nintendo seemed to be obsessed with AR in the 3DS era, so now that the technology is better, maybe they'll want to take another shot. Maybe the Joy-Cons will have a new feature. Maybe they'll add on to the Joy-Con drift, so when you put your controllers down on your desk, they actually start drifting and doing mini donuts. Maybe they'll take another proper shot at VR. Who knows what they'll do. But again, some new gimmick, big or small, will probably be there. And finally, the most important part of any console, the games. We've all seen the detrimental effect of a poor launch lineup, and I would definitely argue the reason for the Switch's early success was due to the games releasing in the first year. Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, Splatoon 2, Fire Emblem Warriors, Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and plenty of third-party titles. This was a stacked year with something for everyone, and the best part about all of it was all of the major first-party games were only a few months away from each other, so you never had to wait that long for another game to come out. The next system definitely needs to have a first year like the Switch did, and with Tears of the Kingdom releasing already, it's obvious it won't launch with a big new 3D Zelda game. So what makes the most sense? The next big 3D Mario adventure. It's been 6 years since we got the last new mainline installment, and it will probably be even longer when the next console launches. So it's definitely about time. We won't list all of the possible first party Switch games that could release in the first year because that's a topic for another video, but I definitely think a new 3D Mario or new Mario Kart game will launch with the next system. And that brings me to the final question. When will we likely see the next console from Nintendo? Well, I think 2023 will be the last major year for the Switch. While it is possible we could get some sort of announcement as to when we can expect to find out more information or even trailer around the end of the year, I think that it's unlikely. Nintendo will probably want to have one last holiday season with the Switch, and heck, maybe we could even get one final big holiday game. Who knows? But 2024, I 100% think at the very least, we will find out what this next system will be and get a trailer and a release date, possibly around the end of the year or maybe at the start, sort of middle of next year, and we get the system launch at the end of 2024. But at the very least, I think we get a trailer that year and the system itself launches early 2025. Either late 2024 or early 2025, I think that this system will come out, because if not, then it is starting to push things a little bit. Now, I know in 2022, Nintendo said the Switch has just reached the middle of its life cycle, but that doesn't mean they won't release its successor before then. I doubt they'll wait all the way until 2027 to release the next system, especially seeing as sales are slowly starting to slow down. You've got to remember, when the Switch first launched, Nintendo said it wouldn't replace the Wii U, and they also kept supporting the 3DS up until 2019. They always do this in case the system flops, so they have something to fall back on. Heck, they even did it with the DS and Game Boy Advance. It's very possible they'll launch the next system and for a few years release games on both systems and maybe have a few exclusives here and there, or maybe they pull a 3DS situation and have some smaller titles like ports and remasters being released on the final few years of the Switch. But if I had to make a solid guess, I'd say late 2024, early 2025, the next system will be released, and it will be called the Nintendo Switch U. I'm kidding, that would be absolutely horrible. Please do not do that.
Sunrise.